alert.
Cheers.
I am not putting my uniform on. It is too bloody hot today. Hey, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Track Podcast. Nobody here was ready for that, but we're gonna do it anyway.
Roll with it. Yeah, just roll with it.
Let's go.
We'll do it live. We
That's
will
what we
do it live.
We're
Fuck it,
doing
do
it.
it live.
Fuck it.
We're doing it live, pre-recorded style. Today, we are gonna talk to you about something.
Star Trek Lower
Okay,
Decks.
Reflections.
so just let you know, I've had COVID for the last week. The brain fog is real. It's worse than a Klingon bird of prey trying to fly through San Francisco. That being said, yes, my esteemed colleagues are correct. We're going to talk to you today about Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 3, Episode 5, Reflections, featuring my favorite Star Trek character ever, Otherford.
Otherford.
So true.
I hate it. I hate
I
it.
should have put that in the notes, damn it.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
Quick, do a quick find and replace in the
I
notes.
gotta edit.
Oh man, today this episode was a lot of fun, and to break it down for you right now, I present to you Big J.
Everybody, okay. As I like to say, let's get lotioned up and ready to go. Episode 5 notes.
Sorry, they got me. Go
In
ahead.
the ensign's hallway, Rutherford is having a nightmare about a ship exploding in front of him. He wakes and screams, scaring another ensign walking down the hallway, seemingly confused about his dream. The captain explains in her log that the ship is at Tolgana 4 and that they'll have time to fulfill some Starfleet quotas. Mariner and Boimler are assigned to the recruitment booth, much to Mariner's dismay, and as they're loading the shuttle, she complains to Ransom. Ransom threatens to send them both to Starbase 80 if they step a foot out of line, reminding them that he'll be checking in. Tendi, meanwhile, notices that Rutherford is off, and she clears his seemingly useless long-term memory cache so that he might be able to take a nap and start getting some sleep again. Unfortunately, he wakes up with a different personality, one that wants to take over, and one that is not terribly pleasant. You know, I think that happens to me. I feel attacked.
Yeah.
Our Rutherford seems to be stuck in his reflection, but no one can hear him except whoever is in his body. Down on the planet, Mariner is trying really hard to recruit to avoid Starbase 80, but the independent space archaeologist in the booth next to them keeps ruining Mariner's pitches. She keeps insulting Starfleet, but Boimler manages to calm Mariner down before she can do any damage. Rutherford, meanwhile, can't get any help, and the new personality begins insulting his girlfriend and trying to escape. Rutherford accidentally lets him know who Tendi is, and he's almost successful in fooling Tendi, except Rutherford discovers that he can hurt his body by punching his implant. Tendi calls security after he escapes into the hallway, excuse me, knowing that whoever is in Rutherford's body isn't him. We find out on the planet that the archaeologist's name is Petra Aberdeen, and she served on the Victory but wised up and got out of Starfleet, calling it a pseudo-navy and further insulting Mariner. She wanted a life of freedom and nonviolence, but Mariner still calls her a thief and tries not to let her anger get the best of her. Rutherford's body gets all the way to the transporter bay, beaming himself onto the captain's yacht and evading Shax's before he can stun him. Our Rutherford buys Shax's some time and begins messing with his implant. And Shax is able to find him before he can take off and stun him. According to T'Ana, Rutherford is still himself, but he's himself from 10 years ago. Tendi is terrified, but T'Ana says that they'll just have to see which Rutherford wakes up. In Rutherford's blank white void of subconsciousness, both Rutherfords start fighting over who should keep the body and which one is an imposter. And the younger Rutherford manifests his old garage and his ship. You're gonna have to help me with this one. Sampaguita?
Sampaguita.
Okay.
Sampaguita.
Sampaguita. Our Rutherford asks why he doesn't remember his garage, and the younger explains that it's because he erased his own memories. And we get a flashback of the surgery that Rutherford experienced last season, in which the doctors say he'll think it was elective. Younger Rutherford is angry that he would choose to wipe his memories, and explains that he's been stored away and trying to get out. Hence the time our Rutherford thought he liked pears once. Only one of them can remain in his body, and the other will be erased. They fight to leave, but they have to figure out what happened first. We learn that Rutherford used to sneak off from the academy to build and test his own engines, since they wouldn't let him do that in Starfleet. He funded all of his projects with Devron races, illegal races that go through the neutral zone. The old Rutherford says they should have a competition, and they decide to have a race where they build their own ships, manifest a track, and the best man wins. Mariner and Boimler are still struggling to recruit, with the Collectors Guild and the Conspiracy Truthers bullying them incessantly until Mariner breaks the tiny model Stargazer ship in frustration. Meanwhile, the two Rutherfords are busy building their ships for the race. The I'm dying on that one. Sampagutta gets it refit in a paint job, while Rutherford builds the Delta Flyer. The younger Rutherford laughs at him, and he's used Starfleet designs when he could have used Vulcan inverters. Our Rutherford, however, is excited about wearing the matching outfit that comes with the ship. Same dude. Once again, back on Telgana 4, the archaeologist continues bullying Mariner by bringing up her mother in the Cerritos. Before the outpost scientists walk up to their booth, Mariner tries to shut it down, but they ask if they could get cool uniforms too, and Boimler explains that they would. They drop the act and start making fun of all the different uniform designs, before taking Boimler's rank pip off his uniform and throwing it on the ground. Boimler sees red and goes ballistic, using a quite few choice words as he starts ripping booths apart and bullying everyone else at the fair. Surprisingly, this gets a lot more people to sign up for Starfleet, saying that if it can give them that kind of confidence, they want it. Mariner starts signing up people, while Boimler begins advocating for the doctor's rights. Both Rutherfords are ready for the race, and the race will go through the neutral zone with rogue planets and all kinds of other dangers. About halfway through the race, the other Rutherford is winning, and starts to get cocky right before a Romulan warbird decloaks and begins firing at both of them. The last one standing will take the body, and suddenly, our Rutherford starts giving orders to his crew, Tendi, Mariner, and Boimler. The other Rutherford said anything goes, and he wasn't going to race without his friends. Meanwhile, Random goes to check on Mariner and Boimler at the booth and watches Boimler break a pencil in rage as Mariner fills pads with contact information for all the new recruits. At the race, why did they make the most complicated ship name ever? I can't pronounce it.
Sampagita.
Sampagita goes down, and Tendi beams the younger Rutherford onto the Delta Flyer and gets them out of there. He admits defeat, and they end up back in the subconscious void. The old Rutherford comments on how much he's grown and says that our Rutherford has lost all his rage. He then remembers how he got his implant, and we see a more clear flashback of the surgery and the accident. An officer stands over him, telling the surgeons to erase all memories he has of him and the project. The surgeon once again assures him that Rutherford will think that the implant was elective. He's horrified that he was a part of a cover-up, and then the younger Rutherford fades away. Our Rutherford waking up in sickbay as himself again. Boimler is sent to the brig for his actions, but Ransom assures him that he's impressed at how the ensign stood up for Starfleet, and invites him for a drink once he's out. In the brig, Rutherford tells the gang about what might have happened when he got his implant, and Boimler praises Mariner for keeping her cool on the planet. Mariner goes off to do the mission log, and it gets interrupted by a call from Petra Aberdeen, the archaeologist. She reveals that she actually needed a distraction to steal back an artifact from the museum that was near them, and offers Mariner more than Starfleet can offer if she's willing to leave the bureaucracy behind her. Mariner declines, but saves her contact information anyway. And that is it. I swear I know how to read. I'm never beforehand, but in my head, it's different than coming out. And so if I sounded babbly, sorry.
You did great. You did.
It's fine.
You did good,
So
thank you.
to explain the name Sampaguita, right? It's the Tagalog name for the national flower of the Philippines.
Okay.
I loved that detail.
It's a kind of a jasmine flower. So
Which is Eugene Cordero's ethnicity.
Yep.
Oh.
For those of you listening, Eugene Cordero is the voice of Otherford. I don't know who the
Yep.
voice of Rutherford is, but he's the same guy.
Rutherford, Nutherford.
Maybe it's Eugene
Yeah.
Corder's mirror universe duplicate that voices Rutherford.
Oh,
But no, I thought that was really cool.
With
I
a
had
goatee.
I had a couple of Filipino mutuals that were really, really happy about that. Don, especially, that were very, very happy about that coming to fruition. I thought that was really, really, really cool.
It
for
is,
Lower
and
Decks to
it's
do.
and it's really thoughtful on the part of the creators and the writers to be like, hey, let's make things get a deeper meaning. It's Lower Decks. If you want to dive deep on it, you can, and it doesn't necessarily have to be Star Trek lore. It can be representation.
And it's something that
Absolutely.
kind of makes sense, right? Like naming your ship after like your national animal, your
course.
national flower,
Yeah.
perfectly logical.
So where does Tom Paris come from that he named it the Delta Flyer?
Well, they're flying in the Delta. That might
Yeah.
have something to do with it.
the
Yeah,
Delta
that might be it.
Are
Quadrant,
you sure?
and it flies.
Might
My
be.
chemistry
The
teacher
Delta
always
Flyer is a
told
type
me
of bird.
Delta means change, and I didn't see any change. They don't have any money.
They changed uniforms. They changed uniforms when they went onto the
Yeah.
Delta Flyer.
But the uniforms didn't fly. The Delta Flyer.
But
Can I
Oh.
just
the
say?
Delta Flyer made them change the uniform.
Oh
Can
man!
I just
For those
say,
of you
if nobody-
listening, you're like,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
hate this pedantic bullshit. Stop! I'm stopping. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. The Delta Flyer is a species of bird. But no, I mean like just
accept.
seeing. I don't know. Look, I'm a Voyager fan. I've been a huge Voyager fan since I started getting back into Trek, and this episode was so cool. I just loved seeing the basically they were recreating, not exactly, but the race episode in Voyager. And that was so cool, and I really loved to see it. And I loved that Rutherford was really excited about the Delta Flyer uniform, because like, hello. Any cosplayer would be like, oh my god, me, so true. I loved how many nods to Voyager there were in it, and then like he was really excited about the Borg tech and the Delta Flyer, and like, because older Rutherford had the Romulan inverters or whatever it was, but he had like Borg tech and a bunch of stuff they learned in the Delta Quadrant, and all that kind of different stuff. And he also had his friends, and I
Yeah.
love
That
him
was-
so much.
That was a sweet moment.
I adore him.
I don't
was
want to do this
lovely.
without my friends.
It was really, really cool. Yeah, I just thought it was really cool that he like was also a Tom Paris fanboy.
And Renzo has decided to return to his bucket to recharge. So,
Not the bucket! Renzo!
yeah.
And what's the bucket? I need to know about the bucket.
Otto's
Otto's
bucket. You know the bucket.
The Odo bucket.
I need
I
a
don't know.
bucket.
Let's see.
Well, I've got a bucket, but I'm
we'll just do that
sleeping
for
in
a
it.
while.
Oh my god, it's awesome.
Yep. Nope. We.
What do you-
What?
What are you drinking, Suzanne?
I'm drinking whiskey and iced tea.
Oh,
Whiskey.
well, isn't that a?
Having a little cocktail. I just cause
That
I
sounds
don't
good.
know.
Ooh.
It's delicious.
Take the
It's
edge
lim-
off.
It's lemon iced tea. It's like a Arnold Palmer but with whiskey in it.
I have been
Nice.
dosing off of lemon water for like 5 days now, and I don't think I'm ever gonna go back. I'm just
That's
Lemon
very
water?
true.
I'm just gonna put lemon juice in water from now on and defeat scurvy for the rest of my life. Ah, man. Dude, okay. The thing that I saw that really freaked me out the most was the Vogon. Vorgon.
Borgon.
There was a
Vorgon.
Vorgon.
Yep. There
Now,
sure
if you don't
was.
remember
Yeah.
the Vorgons, they were from
Yep.
the 4th season episode Captain's Holiday. They're from the future. And and the last time we saw them, they were trying to stop something that they knew already had happened, which was the destruction of the Toxutat. So, what can we take away from this?
That the Vorgons exist in the 24th century as well?
Because they're time travelers, yeah.
No.
Oh,
that
shit.
They exist then too.
That there's another artifact they're looking at, and it's at this swap meet.
No.
At
The
flea market?
Vorgons, there's no reason to think that the Vorgons are like novel and new to the 27th century or whatever they were from. They just were around at this time too. No need to get suspicious about time travel so quickly.
But we
I know.
had...
I know.
Okay, but if they include them in the show, knowing that they were time travelers in the older episode,
Mhm.
Sure. We also had an Andorian. We also had a Kivas Fajo
We had-
freaky alien.
We had an adventurer person steal an artifact and then disappear with it, and the time travelers were there with the artifact, and I had this whole headcanon. They're there to steal Rom's Negastaff.
We don't know that's ROMs. It could be from the previous Negus. Could be a couple hundred years old. Could be some boring Negus we've never heard of.
Wait a second.
Boring Negus.
Wait a second.
I've run out of tinfoil for my hat.
Passed down? Isn't it like ancient?
I don't know. I would have thought that each one got their own because they want to make it in their own likeness or whatever.
Well, Rom is the Negus.
He's now.
How do you lose his staff?
We don't know that one's his. Could be one of the old ones.
You know what? Rom's just darn soft-hearted enough to be like, oh, I'll just donate it to here to save the kids. And it just ends up in a museum.
Oh my god.
Besides, we
That
know
would
that the
be
Negus does loan out his staff when he has a grand proxy. Remember how Neelix pretended to be one for a bit?
He does do the grand
Oh,
proxy.
They probably,
yes.
Oh,
they
yeah.
probably have more than one staff.
What was it? There was that great episode where Cisco had it, and he made Quark kiss it.
Point is, there's probably more than one staff
Aren't you
anyways.
forgetting something?
I'm weak.
Ah, man. Okay, so
So-
other cool
I'm sorry, you're back. Go
references. Sorry, I was just gonna go through the other cool references. What did you want to talk about?
So I fucking loved seeing the Daredex, like in terrifying decloaking glory, right? It's such a good looking ship. It's so terrifying, and it just makes the Sempagita and the Delta Flyer look like mincemeat, which is appropriate. So I love that.
And it was so well animated too. I mean, from like an
It
artistic
was.
perspective, it was so beautifully done. Because I know that kind of animation style is really difficult. And they did a really good job. I mean, it was beautiful. I thought it was really, really cool. And it did. That's true. It did dwarf the other ships, and it made it very realistic to me.
Did you know that a Galaxy-class starship could fit inside that empty space of a Daredex?
Mhm.
That's yeah.
You know,
Yikes.
you know that the Stone of Gaul has been stolen from wherever it was by the collectors.
In one of my favorite Star Trek novels, there's a Defiant class ship that parks itself inside of the space between the wings of the Daredex and decides to spin, and it uses its like its static warp bubble to shred the Daredex around it.
I feel like I've read that one. Which novel was that? Do you
I
remember?
believe it was an Avenger, which was a Judith and Stephen Reeves Garfield book.
That was Kirk Shatnerverse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That was
Yes. I thought that sounded very familiar. Okay.
It's kind of a terrifying idea, right? A smaller ship gets in between your wings where you can't shoot at and then just shreds you by spinning slightly.
Yeah, that's
Jesus.
kind of scary.
That's frightening.
That's not cool, guys. So at the collector's table, and I'm gonna put this on the viewer for everybody. At the collector's table, you can very clearly see that there is a painting of Data's, a Bajoran tablet, some badges, Ducktog. I can't remember what the name of that game was with the purple hexagon and the little red chips. But we also see Spock's helmet is there,
Okay.
Geordi's visor or a visor, two little Data soap statues like we saw at the mall that one time, the little Ferengi thing which looks very much like a thing I've seen on Etsy, so that's a hell of a deep cut there. And then right next to that, the Stone of Gaul, which was the MacGuffin from what was that two-parter where Picard went off with the archaeologists and they stole the Vulcan psionic resonator?
Yes. Oh,
So
damn.
Yes.
And then Riker got all mixed up in the two.
yeah, and then at the end, Data put
Gambit.
Riker in the brig.
Gambit.
Oh,
The Gambit.
Suzanne.
Yeah, Gambit was the name of the episode.
The
Gambit.
purple hexagon game, is that what you're talking about? I think it's called Cottascott.
Is that Cottascott?
Is that from Voyager? Is that from
Looks like it.
Voyager? Yeah,
Okay.
the
Mhm.
hexagon. Yeah, that's from Voyager.
Well-
Which I loved. There were so many little nods to Voyager in this episode too that I just absolutely loved, and some big nods to Voyager too, and I loved that. That's the second time that's happened. Yay!
Also, on the collector's face, he's got that gold ribbon like the other one had in the Most Toys. That gold
Kivas Fajo.
ribbon. Well, Kivas Fajo was the collector. The other guy had the gold ribbon in his face.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Oh,
Yes.
right.
But
Hey,
no,
he's the
oh,
buyer.
wait.
Paylor Toff or something.
Mhm.
But anyway,
the guy that's with the collector at the collector's table is the same species as Kivas Fajo. Look at the little lines on the side of his head.
There's Zybalian. So you've got a Zybalian,
Oh, okay.
and the guy with the ribbon in his face is the same species as the other guy with the ribbon in his face from that episode. Which I love that. I love that, like, makes it look like they work together. But that ribbon specifically, that gold ribbon, has been art in a dozen episodes of Star Trek across the franchise. They just put it on a shelf. Here, put this gold ribbon on a shelf. Okay,
Awesome.
that's cool. So
We can use it everywhere.
That was a lot of fun.
The
to
easiest
kind of
Easter egg possible.
break down there. The Archaeologist Guild, I didn't recognize a lot on the Archaeologist Guild. She's got a little like monolith there, and then behind her she's got the same kind of swords that Worf had in his quarters on the Enterprise D. And then at some point Boimler gets all up in the faces of the Wadi. I'm so glad those guys are back.
It's awesome.
I mean, this episode is just filled with tons of alien races that we haven't seen in a long time.
Yeah,
There's Antedians, Lurians. There looks like a Dosi, to be honest, but there are just so many in this scene.
You mean a Dozai? Like the ones that have the Tulaberry wine?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Well,
it's awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to mention the Spock and Kirk animated series
yes.
like cutout thing. Look, I know it's silly and I know it's the most obvious one, but like for them to make a nod to the animated series as well, I just thought was super cool. And that they were loading it on the ship, and it's part of the Starfleet recruitment. It's so funny. I love that.
I mean, you've got to have a pitch, right? And they even actually
pitch.
confirmed something nicely in this episode about how, like, do I have to go to the academy if I want to join Starfleet? No, we have an NCO Corps. Love
Right.
that confirmation. We don't
was
really
cool.
hear much about that.
That was cool.
Yeah, because Miles O'Brien had mentioned in an episode of DS9 that he didn't go to the academy.
He's a working man.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Working man.
Blue collar through and through.
Absolutely. I just loved it. And I loved that, like, I loved the whole, you might stand on the bridge, sure. Like, that's exactly how recruitment works. And then, like, the pseudo Navy comment, I was like, oh, yeah.
Having actually worked one of those booths here, like, at an event, like, trying to recruit people, you really do got to give those, like, vague, sure, yeah, absolutely, you might do that kind of stuff.
Sure.
To be
Right, of course
optimistic.
you will.
But I gotta say, I really liked Petra's character. I thought that she was a pretty realistic, like, approach to somebody who was a little jaded from the time in Starfleet.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought that she was good, and I think that she'll be an interesting contact for Mariner if they do keep up with each other a bit, because that's an interesting plot line for Mariner, because she's always been torn by this, like, desire for freedom that Starfleet stifles. So maybe that archaeologist approach is something that might appeal to her.
I see a little bit. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, am I the only one that thinks that there was a missed opportunity by the archaeologist not being Vosh?
Vosh
Or
is
just too much on the nose.
probably a bit much. I mean, there's got to be more than one archaeologist, right? We can't make the universe so small
well,
that we
yeah.
only see the one archaeologist.
That's true. I mean, I guess it would make sense to introduce a new character, though, because it's somebody we don't know, and so it's somebody that,
Right.
like, we don't know how they would influence Mariner, et cetera, et cetera. I saw Petra as a little bit similar to Seven in that way, of this whole, like, Starfleet is too bureaucratic, and, like, I want to actually do the things that I want to do and be able to help people or do this, you know, without being part of a pseudo navy, you know. I saw kind of a parallel there, and I'm wondering if I'm curious to see where that goes with Mariner, because it seems like her whole thing is, like, hasn't really been able to get out of Starfleet and doesn't know where she would go, but now there's an option. And
You and I
know,
took her Petra very differently. I saw her as a lot like Angel, Captain Angel from Strange New Worlds.
that's fair as well.
Because
Yeah.
I was nervous that this was going to be like some sort of like grand plan to ingratiate or make an enemy out of Starfleet to draw their attention, sort of thing. Turns out she kind of was. She was trying to make a ruckus so that she could steal something. But it seemed very similar to the Captain Angel like approach to just, oh, I'm ex-Starfleet, so I know what you're going through. Let me tell you how you should approach these things. This is what you could do if you changed your ways to be more like me. And it's just like, no,
Yeah.
suspicious. Instant suspicious.
No, I tend to agree with you actually there, because Seven, I feel like, was more like, oh, well, I got rejected by Starfleet, so this is just shit. I guess I have to do this now. But I also, I don't think that Seven has any resentment towards Starfleet other than them not accepting her. I don't think she has any resentment except for, like, the ones that gave up, like Picard at the beginning of the season when she said the only thing worse would be giving up. So yeah, that makes a little more sense. She seems a little more diabolical than Seven would be, because I think Seven has good intentions. I think Petra is a little more
Self-serving.
Shady.
self-serving and also like scary.
A bit on the shady side.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Definitely on the shady side.
So we haven't said a whole lot about Rutherford.
I was just gonna bring up Badgie. Like,
Badgie.
Rutherford said that the way that he's tried to manifest is through programs and personality things and Bear's
Oh,
thing.
right.
Oh,
When he was
shit.
like programs trying to attack you, I was like, Badgie?
Oh shit.
I did
wonder.
not draw that connection. I like that.
Yeah, I
So,
love that. God, I miss Badgie. Bring him
yeah.
back.
Yeah, I miss Badgie too. But
I think he
look
will
up
be
and
back
he's
in this
above my
series.
desk, and it's fine.
Oh my god, I love that. I think he will be back in the season though, because I think I've seen him in the trailer. I feel like I did. Which is delightful because Badgie is the best. This is hello, father. It's just awesome. Absolutely.
And the voice
amazing.
acting was perfect.
Can I teach you a lesson? Just one of the best characters.
Good voice
no,
actor
Rutherford-
too.
You're right. Rutherford was interesting. I loved seeing that. I loved seeing, because I saw a lot of myself in Rutherford, of that sort of just like young rage that people tend to get, of just like, oh, I'm not gonna do what adults tell me, like whatever, I'm like old enough to know, like whatever, you know, all that kind of shit. I see that a little bit of myself in Rutherford. And so like I just really enjoyed seeing the dichotomy of the two interacting, and just like one of them being kind of the nerdy side and like the one that's like, oh, I want to make friends and like have fun, and the other one being like, whatever, I'm breaking rules and I'm doing what I want because I don't care.
But so Rutherford's not all that different from a lot of other characters that we've seen in Trek, right? Like, young Jean-Luc Picard was a jock who got into knife fights and, like, womanized and whatever, right?
Mhm.
Kirk, not as much. Kirk was called a stack of books with legs, right? But other captains and other characters out there
So true.
have been so much like Rutherford was at this point. Particularly Kelvin Kirk, who was willing to get into a bar fight, to have a blast, to make some noise, to do whatever the hell he wanted, to do his things his way, right?
Very true.
So Rutherford he's got a commonality with them, and I'm hoping that we learn more about what it was exactly that tamped down on that aggressive attitude of his. Because for Kirk, it was that stab through the heart. For Picard, it was a stab through the heart. For Kirk, it was getting recruited into Starfleet like out of the blue, and then thrust into command out of the destruction of Vulcan, whatever. So like, what was it that happened to Rutherford that put him on this path? A very different path than his younger self had envisioned.
Yeah, I'm also interested to learn like what the cover-up was, and whether or not that officer is going to be like a callback to a different Trek, a callback to somebody that we already know, or if it's going to be a new officer, new drama, new thing. You know, I think that because you know the implant was obviously the sort of defining moment of like, oh, this is where the personality splits. But I think that I'm interested to see who that officer was, and also who the surgeons were, and why they agreed to it, and who agreed to it, and that's going to be really cool. And I think that they did a really good reveal with that, because we didn't really get a ton more than we already knew, but we got enough like that we didn't know, that it makes it interesting, and it makes it more like, okay, I want to learn more, but we have at least more than we already knew.
It's our first thread for this,
right?
Yep.
I was going to ask top candidates for Shadow Man.
I don't know.
So
Renza?
I was thinking that it might be something like Eric Pressman, right? We know that he was a rear admiral or a vice admiral. I don't remember. He was in the Admiralty. He got caught doing violating the Treaty of Algernon with the cloaking device and the phasing cloak. We know he was involved in Starfleet intelligence, which probably means he had contact with Section 31. Maybe instead of going straight to jail, they busted him down a couple ranks and he started running other programs for them, right? Like, hey, here's this hotshot engineer who might be the next Leah Brahms. Let's cultivate his aptitude. Oh, it blew up in his face? Well, he's not so useful to us now, but let's make sure he doesn't remember that he worked for us, kind of thing, right? That doesn't seem all that crazy for me from an Eric Pressman. And if they could actually get Terry O'Quinn to like reprise the role, that would be awesome.
That would be cool, and it would make sense with the Romulan inverters, because he was doing all of those different things in
Vulcan
the neutral
inverters,
zone.
I think.
Was it Vulcan inverters? I thought it was,
It was
Romulan.
Vulcan.
I think
Just
it was
kidding. Vulcan inverters. My bad.
So he was working on an engine when the accident happened.
Yep.
what kind of engine was it again, or did we not know that it was just?
We don't really have details.
From-
It was
We
just a
don't know.
super-powered
Yeah.
engine.
From the appearance, it looked like a matter-to-matter reactor, so something like a small warp core for like a smaller ship, but we don't know enough to say.
Because I'm trying to think if I could glean who the shadowy person would be based on. As I say it out loud, that doesn't make sense. I was going to say based on what Rutherford was working on, but the engine Rutherford was working on was just an independent project. It wasn't something he was assigned to. But then when he was injured, some shadowy Starfleet person took it upon themselves to want to implant him. But
I don't think there's a
doesn't
reason to
make
think that they're two
sense.
different things, right? Like the
Yeah.
mad
Yeah.
scientist in fiction almost always takes his work home with him, right? He may
Right.
be working for someone, but he's still working on it when he's at home. So in this case, I would think Rutherford or old Rutherford may have been working on this design for some shadowy group,
Okay.
but he played with it at home, thought he was going to crack the case, and instead it cracked his skull open. So something along those lines.
Yeah, like the whole line of like this is gonna set us back years. Obviously, like Rutherford was working for them, and like probably ended up being one of those kids that like almost got kicked out of the academy or like got caught, and then whoever the shadowy figure is, realized like, oh, we can use him because we can convince him that we're allowing him to do this because we're Starfleet, when in reality we're all breaking the rules, type of thing.
I don't
I
have a
think he was
great
just an easy
guess on
target.
this one.
For all we know, he might have been inventing the protostar drive, right, for Prodigy, but we
Now,
just
that would
don't
be
know
sick.
yet. Yeah, I don't know. We just
That'd
don't know
be
yet. They're going to give us more, I hope.
Yeah, me too.
Agreed.
I wonder if it has anything to do with them doing the race in the Devron system, which is where the anti-time anomaly was in one particular reality. Whether it was there at all is yet to be seen. But
I think
Yeah,
it's
from all
more
good
than
things.
just identifiably Romulan space or right on the Romulan neutral zone.
Mm-hmm.
It's fine. My
I'm
my
with you,
thought,
though. It might
wasn't-
be.
I wasn't too into Pressman. I much more liked the idea that it was a aspiring and ambitious young Dougherty. Admiral Dougherty, last seen getting his face stretched on a table in Star Trek Insurrection.
Timeline-wise, how does that work
that-
out for us?
Well,
Yeah, 'cause-
timeline-wise, it's 10 years before. It's basically like 7 years before Insurrection. He could have gotten a promotion from here. That's just where my brain was thinking. Like, he maybe got promoted up. You can't really see
It's not
if he's
crazy.
got 3 or 4 pips here.
Wait a minute. The Rutherford accident was 7 years before Insurrection. So we're talking easily somewhere within
2368.
TNG time.
2369, 2370. 2370 is when, or 2371 is when the new uniform's starting to get introduced, and we saw a mishmash of those along the Enterprise D before it was destroyed.
Uh-huh.
And we know that Lower Decks takes place circa 2381 plus.
Yeah, about
So it's just about to intersect with Generations, if you go back and give it just a little bit of a stretch.
But, well, at least according to Memory Alpha here, Doherty died in 2375.
Oh, so it's 5 years
So I-
before.
Yeah.
Okay,
Either way.
so
I'm a little
But-
dubious with the Dougherty claim just because he was a 3-star, like a 3-pip admiral,
Okay,
which is a bit higher
but hear me out.
climb.
Picard was a 4-pip admiral, like 6 years after Nemesis. So
Fair.
rank. They gave a
They're
cadet.
flexible.
They gave a cadet a ship in the Kelvin universe. They don't really care about rank at that point.
That's fair.
But see, Dougherty's interest in Rutherford could be explained by his interest in the biochemicals that they wanted to get out of the rings.
I think
in
it's
Insurrection.
not a match.
You know what I think would actually be better than any of these suppositions for existing characters? Don't give me a bad admiral. Give me just another commander or another captain, somebody new, right? We've got so
Yeah.
many bad admirals as it is. I don't want it to be
I
somebody
know.
like Leighton. I don't want Dougherty. I don't want Press. I don't want it. Give me something
That
new.
would be
and-
cool.
Oh, you know who okay, here's my guess. Shit, the guy that wanted to take apart Data, in the season 2
Maddox?
episode where Maddox, Bruce Maddox.
I don't
I'm
know.
thinking-
This doesn't seem like it's his specialty. He was all about robotics and cybernetics. This is an engine design.
But
That's true, but
cybernetics is what was put on Rutherford.
That's fair.
So,
I mean, it's definitely an option. I don't disagree with that.
yeah, I think it's going to be one of those things where
They'd have to
Grasping at
explain.
straws.
They'd have to explain how Maddox switched from a science division to a command division.
That's true.
But really, other than that,
Oh.
we are grasping at straws. For all we know, it could be Mariner's dad.
We also know that Maddox's ending is still as a roboticist, so
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
That is true.
And
But that's the thing. We really don't know much. And I think that was probably on purpose. I think they
Oh, for
probably
sure.
don't want anyone to be able to conclusively guess who it is at this point.
every
'cause
show
otherwise
I'm
they would've
watching
given
right
us-
now is
you know.
all about creating ambiguity in the Watchers, right? Like the Rings of Power show. Is it this guy Sauron? Is that guy Sauron? Is that one Sauron? That's the whole
Absolutely,
show right
yeah.
now, right? Same thing with House of the Dragon. Are they the bad guys? Are they the bad guys? Are they the... Just can't be sure.
Sorry.
Here it's just, who is this villain? And is he actually a villain?
it's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
I agree with that.
I'm all for the speculation game. That's what I'm here for.
Just make the twist, if there is a twist, something at least that makes sense, right? Don't just lost me. Don't do that.
It's
That would-
Rutherford from the future.
Or don't do
My God.
Don't do who future guy was intended on being
It's Jonathan
in
Archer.
Enterprise. Yeah.
God.
Yeah, that would have been so cheap.
I'm
That's
literally
what it is.
wearing a Doctor Who shirt. I've had enough of people from the future messing with their past selves for a bit.
Yeah.
Ha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We could just not for a while. That'd be great.
Let's make this not a time traveler, please.
So far, we've been pretty good with avoiding weird bits of time travel on this show.
They've only had to go back in time to like save the Earth like 4 or 5 times max.
So fun.
And, you know-
speaking of like,
Someone on Reddit broke down the list, and it's like 7 times.
They probably just don't know about all of them. They're
oh
only
my
ensigns.
God,
Right.
that's true. They're just
Yeah.
ensigns.
Well, and I was like, but you know, if you have a mission to go back in time to save the world versus you accidentally get thrust back in time to save the world, Mariner might be making a distinction there.
Besides,
That's
I'll
true.
bet you that nobody in Starfleet really knows the details of all good things. I'll bet you Picard mostly kept that shit to himself because they'd think he was crazy.
Yeah. It's like, all right, Grandpa, let's get you back to bed.
how many times would you be able to get out of any kind of court martial by being like, no, Q put me into a time pocket dimension where I had to save the universe. Really, honestly, listen to me.
Blame it on
Yeah,
Q.
that's
That's what
true.
I would do.
Blame it on Q.
Q
God.
shows up. I would like to testify for myself, please. I
Right,
don't
it's like,
know
I thought
this
you were
person.
dead. Shit.
No. That's future me. Past me is very much alive.
I'm doing this pro
yeah.
se.
But
by
they're
the
not
way.
temporally locked. Their future and past me's are the same me.
We're getting into time travel again.
Yeah.
We're getting
Headaches.
into
And it's giving me
we're
a
getting
headache.
into that again. I want to talk
Alright.
about Boimler going to the brig.
Okay,
That's
I
never
loved that.
happened.
I loved it. He
It was
deserved
great.
it. Yeah, he deserved it, and it was
He
good
got
for
so mad he
character
broke a
development.
pencil. He broke a pencil.
And
'Cause he was mad.
he writes on the wall of the brig Boimler's guest house. It's Mariner's HQ, but it's Boimler's
Yeah.
guest house.
Oh, I didn't see that. That's so
He
cute.
added to the drawing.
Yep. Their friends are good. They really
love
love
them.
each other. It's
We
No,
also
I
got to
agree
see
with
Kay
Rizzo.
Sean again.
He deserved it. He deserved it.
We did get to see Kayshawn. Kayshawn has kind of been relegated to like glorified extra this season. It's kind of okay.
Well, how much character
Um,
development are we
When he drowned in the
expecting
swamp.
out of Kayshawn? So I think we're getting what we're going to get.
Marab, his sails unfurled.
Marab with sails unfurled. You want to leave?
Yeah, get out.
Oh.
Don't show such disrespect to Kay Sean.
Man.
Oh my God.
Temba.
But no, I'm with you. It's weird that we have essentially a chief security officer and also a chief tactical officer at the same time because we've got Shax and Kayshawn. There's some overlap there, so I don't know. Kayshawn doesn't get much character development as a result.
Yeah. I mean, we
Well,
were
but, yeah.
supposed to. I think we were supposed to think that Shax was dead when Kayshawn came aboard, And then Shax came back, and that's what I wanted to talk about. I just remembered that. They've had a lot of references this season to the koala, the Black Mountain. I am suspecting at the end of the episode someone is going to have to die. And season 4 is going to be about confronting the koala and the Black Mountain and fighting the 3 faceless versions of your father. I think
That'd be cool.
would be cool.
But also, I don't want anybody to die.
We just had Hemmer die. Wasn't that enough for you?
No,
Right?
No, it will never be enough for me. You know,
Oh, shit.
you know what they're doing in Picard season 3. You know everything's on the table.
Dag, I like where I thought you were going with the 3 faceless virgins.
No, that's not what happens. You have to fight the 3 faceless versions of your father.
I know, but
No.
Get your mind out the gutter.
what's in my mind sounds better to me. The
Keep
3
your
faceless
mind.
virgins,
I just realized something.
like the 4 horsemen.
What if one of the main people dies, and the reason that we haven't seen T'Lyn yet is because T'Lyn replaces one of them at the end of the season?
You heard it here on Beyond Trek Podcast. In season 4, T'Lyn replaces Rutherford. What are your thoughts and opinions?
Not Rutherford! I
Would you
can't
prefer
lose Rutherford.
Tendy? Would you prefer Tendy?
No, I don't want any of them to die.
Well, obviously the one who's going to get Tasha Yard on this show is the Pelican counselor dude, or whatever the hell he
Miggly
is.
Mo.
Miggly Mo, yeah, he's got to go. Miggly Mo's got to go.
I mean, honestly, with the way Jack Quaid's career is
catchy.
kind of like notching up, they could kill Boimler.
I hope
I
not.
love
I really like
because he's
Boimler.
Bold Boimler, and Bold Boimler's come up more than once, and maybe his final thing is I'm Bold Boimler, I'll save the ship, and then he dies, and then T'Lyn replaces him.
And then,
gonna be
the
upset
season,
about it.
and then his transporter clone gets demoted and has to come back and join them.
But then Jack Quaid isn't free from the voice role, right?
No, Jack Quaid has to stay.
Besides, from everything Jack Quaid has said
Locked
on
in a
interviews,
basement.
it sounds like he absolutely loves this role.
Of course
So,
he does.
Yeah, Jack Quaid is locked in a basement. He can't.
It's like he's like playing he's playing a 24th century version of Huey.
Yeah.
and getting paid.
And getting paid.
The check clears. Yep.
Yep, the check clears. Yeah. Okay. So, I want to address this. If you guys feel like we've said what we wanted to say about the episode, because I've got some beef to take off the grill.
Oh, we have beef.
I'm here for the beef.
We've got
Beef.
Big J's beef.
Serve it
Beef
up,
me.
Big J.
We gotta come up with a theme song for Big J's beef. We gotta
Can we?
commission somebody else.
We need it. We need a theme song. Renzo, come on, give me some fun. Don't
Renzo,
shake
we
your
gotta have a
head.
theme song for Big
Let
J's
me have
beef.
something.
do we
here.
need to celebrate beef?
Yes.
Absolutely. Red. It's just the red alert sound.
That works.
You
Big
can
J's
do better.
beef.
You can do better. I want I don't know, some hip hop, something. I don't know. We'll brainstorm. We'll circle back
Licensing.
around. We'll circle back around to that one. We'll talk offline. Okay, so this is going to be pretty bold beef, but I've been thinking this each episode of this season. Maybe it's just me, but I am finding it difficult to have the kind of talks that we've had on past Star Trek series like Picard, some certain episodes of Lower Decks, a couple of real thought-provoking discussions with Prodigy. I feel like Lower Decks is in that shtick where it's all about catch the reference and find the Easter egg. Like the amount of actual substance seems to be lacking. It's a pause the episode here, and here, and pick out all the throwbacks, references, etc. And for me, as we're talking about all of this, and before we sat down to talk, I kept thinking in my head, what would I talk about? Like, what stuck out for me? And I wasn't finding it. Like it wasn't grabbing me like the whole thing with Boimler and his girlfriend and him being insecure with his girlfriend's big, broad-shouldered, strapping dude. We had a whole conversation about that. That was like really tied into real world stuff. And we also had the discussion in Prodigy with relating to a parent. What was so dire or important where this father could run off the ship, leave his daughter in peril, and there was a lot of good time we spent on that. I'm getting this feeling that Lower Decks is not quite lending itself to those deep dive conversations. It's kind of more of a I saw a tribble in the bush back behind that stick and things like that. Now tell me I'm wrong, tell me I'm being just old crotchety, but that's how I feel. I'm out cutting the grass today thinking, what the hell am I even going to say about this episode? I was coming up dry. Suzanne, help me out here.
So this episode specifically, I think, had a couple of things. One was Boimler learning that, like, yeah, losing your cool might get you in a little bit of trouble, but like Ransom was still impressed with him standing up for what he believed in. And so, like, yeah, it's not necessarily like perfect to be like you want to be on your best behavior, but sometimes you have to stand up for what you believe in. So that was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The second one was Rutherford racing with his friends. And the biggest scene that for me in the episode was when Rutherford was dying and said that, like, I had so much rage in me and I don't see that in you, and I don't, you have to keep those friends, we can't, because if we both inhabit this body then we'll both be gone, but like you don't have that rage in you anymore, like you have a brighter future ahead of you and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So there are lessons in it, and I think that the show is meant to be like a comedy show, and so there aren't as many rather lessons to be learned from it. But I think that even especially in this episode, like we haven't talked about it a ton, but Rutherford had that moment of like, I want to race with my friends. I want to be backed up by my crew and the people that I care about, which to me is the whole point of Star Trek, is that found family aspect of it, and sort of knowing that like I have people that will back me up no matter what. That was in episode 1 too, with Mariner sort of stealing those Cerritos, etc. And then, Boimler realizing that I don't always have to be completely within the lines to be right,
Mm-hmm.
and to be correct about, like, or at least to stand up for what I believe in. And so, yeah, he spends the night in the brig, but at the same time, his superior officer still invited him out for a drink, even though it's protocol. He was like, that was kind of sick. So I think that there are lessons to be learned, but I do agree that Lower Decks does have that sort of like Easter eggy, pause it here, pause it there, try and figure out all of it. And a lot of it goes over my head because I haven't seen every single Trek all the way through in a very long time. I haven't seen all of TNG yet. I haven't seen all of DS9 yet. So a lot of it kind of goes over my head, but like I still think that there are lessons to be found within it. Personally, that's my take.
So, Big J, my approach is that I think you're right, that the show does do a lot of just fan service inclusion of Easter eggs. That is absolutely something that they do, right? But I don't think that detracts from the fact that it's still telling Star Trek stories, but they're comedic ones. It's a different tone of show than every other Star Trek. Every other Star Trek has been more serious than it's been funny. They have funny, but they're more serious than they're funny. This show is the opposite. This show is more funny than it is serious, so you have to take the way that they tell you these lessons differently, right? Whereas in this episode, we see this hilarious story about like somebody battling their inner demons and trying to repress their old situations, their old feelings. Here they present it as this funny, like, haha, let's build spaceships and race each other, right? In another show, we might have had an episode like maybe a character has like their evil half fighting against their good half around the ship, or maybe their half Klingon side is trying to rage and break things while their half human side is trying to calm people down. We've literally had the same story told for other characters, right? We see the same thing in other episodes too, like in Room for Growth, the previous one. Like we had this great storyline about how like Jack and Billups were like trying to get this crew to like relax, right? Like Ransom was worried about the engineers and so was the captain, so they put the engineers on a rest break. Sometimes taking a break is important. It's presented funny. They have to play with a kitten. They have a puppy's room and a kitten's room, and only weird people go to the kitten's room, right? That's funny, but it's true that we burn ourselves out. But the ways that we find relaxation are different from person to person, so one size does not fit all, right? The same thing is true for all these episodes, man.
Yeah, you're right, and I'm glad you brought up that episode because that was one we missed talking about. But we can easily kind of twine it in here. There are some relevant points there. Is that being overworked, getting an assignment to work a booth down at the flea market, getting some of these shit assignments, and you get people on the ship, on these Starfleet ships that are workaholics, and they can't relax, don't know how to relax. Take them to a spa, go get your nails done, go get a pedicure. Well, I'm thinking about like, oh, what was that thing I was working on? And it's 2 a.m. You wake up in your sleep because now you have the solution, or you realize what line of code was messing up your whole thing. I've had that happen, and I've certainly been stuck at my desk, not wanting to give up on the thing because like, all right, let me try one more thing. And in Starfleet, I can only imagine being able to.
I mean, a good boss will kick
rest.
you off your desk. A good boss will kick you out and be like, you need to stop. Go home. Come back at this tomorrow with a fresh mind. My boss has done this to me countless times. It's like, Renzo, it is 11 o'clock. Get off. I will kick you off the VPN right now if you don't go to bed, kind of thing. Right? Like, this happens. Right? So I feel like that's the same kind of thing you'll see in Starfleet. A good boss will know when to tell you to fuck off. This is not your problem right now.
Right.
And Starfleet's supposed to be like our ideal world, our ideal employment, our ideal people. We see that all throughout Lower Decks. I think Lower Decks has done a great job of humanizing how Starfleet treats people. Remember when Rutherford wanted to switch out of engineering? It was like a party. Everybody celebrated. Congratulations, you do great wherever you go. He goes to command. He struggles there. Ransom supportive. Goes to another place. Security, hugs, baby bear, and so forth and so on. He tries all these things and everybody's supportive. Right? These are lessons that we can aspire towards, but even if they're not realistic. Something like this, where you're being sent to do a shit assignment like a recruitment drive, it's pretty boring. I've done them. But they're important for the wealth, or for the health and wealth of the company, or of the organization in this case, right?
Someone's got to do it.
Finding people is important. So
you've got to sit the booth. That's just...
Somebody's got to
that's how
scrub
everything works.
biofilters. Somebody's got to get the carbon scoring off the sheet metal or whatever, right? Like, these things matter.
There's also something to be said about the saturation of what Star Trek is today. Star Trek today is overarching plots, whether it's episode to episode or serialized. We didn't have that 30 years ago, and even if we can watch those episodes nostalgically, there's still a hell of a lot of stuff that doesn't happen in those episodes that you're like, wait a second. Wait, you're telling me that dude lived 40 years for 24 minutes, and in the next episode he's perfectly fine? Nah, he should have been relieved of command, taken to the farm, chill out, have some margaritas, go to his wine vineyard. He should have been gone for like 2 years.
Janeway.
What about best of both worlds, dude? After a couple days of Zlocutus, you should be on the farm.
The best of both worlds is the culmination of Picard's busiest December on record. In December of that year, just before he gets assimilated at the end of the season, he has to deal with dying and being regenerated by John Doe, having Sarek dump 200 years of emotional gravitas into his brain and having to deal with it, and then get assimilated. Like, Picard,
just another day in
you're a hero of the Federation. We are retiring you. Everything you need is going to be taken care of. Go live on your vineyard. Just go.
Your vineyard?
Yep.
Vineyard. It's a vineyard. It's fine.
I like the
Because
vineyard.
he's going to be whining about it.
Hey,
Good
yo.
cover. Good cover.
Good cover. Well done. No, I mean, I don't know. I think that's the truth with, like, I mean, obviously, Janeway needed therapy so bad.
Everybody
but,
does.
Like, everybody does. And I'm sure there was a therapy program in the holodeck, but, whatever.
I would join
Fairhaven, that's fine.
Starfleet. If Starfleet was a real thing, I'd be there signing up.
Same?
That's
Sure
fair.
would.
Yeah, I would. And I mean, I don't know. I feel like I would like probably shit my pants once or twice getting in a bad situation on a starship. I would probably be like, Mommy!
The first time you dive towards a black hole, I'm sure everybody rounds
The
themselves.
first time I skydive on a space elevator, I'm like, fuck.
The first time I get transporter clone, I would be pissed.
The first time, implying that there's a second and a third.
Oh God,
Um,
no.
But I mean, I don't know. I think what I love about Lower Decks is that, like, it is comedy and it is funny and it humanizes Starfleet for us. I think that it makes it to the point, because I feel like my main complaint with some of the Star Trek shows is like, why are we not talking about this? Like, why are we just moving on to the next mission and like moving on to the next thing and not like maybe having a little tiny discussion about, hey, we're all traumatized.
Which
Let's have a
Discovery, I
little
think,
group
does better.
therapy.
Yes.
Discovery handles that a lot better because they talk about the problems and the trauma that comes from these things.
Yeah.
Conversely, Lower Decks is episodic. They may have some overarching plot lines that stretch across the season, but it is largely episodic. They're not going to talk about Galrakians in this episode and how they attacked the Cerritos, even though there was one in the episode, right?
Who was
Same thing.
interested in crystals.
Yeah, it's very fitting. But point is, this show is going to have that same kind of problem TNG did, where every episode is somewhat disconnected from the previous, with like small exceptions, as we've seen the Pac-led shit and now Rutherford's thing. But yeah, I mean, I think that's just a limitation of the format that they've chosen for the show. It's gonna feel a little bit less serious. It's gonna feel a little bit less joined to the rest of it, and it's gonna be less like teachy because of the length. Episodes are only 20-something minutes long, so we've got limitations here, Big J. I don't think your beef is quite so warranted.
Okay.
Yeah,
His beef is
There's a
warranted
feeling I got,
where I'm
suspicion
concerned
I had.
because I only watch this show for the deep dive, weird cuts, stuff.
I live for them too, man. But
I do recognize, like, there are plenty of episodes that we have talked about where we've been like, wow, this is kind of profound. You guys want to like dig into this? You know, when we went through Veritas, and like as much fun as that episode was, it turns out they were at like a Chuck E. Cheese or something like that. You know, the teardown of that episode is Boimler is the true fans standing up for the writers, telling the fans who hate the show to fuck off. If you don't like it, don't watch it. That was a deeper episode, and we're gonna go up and down on that.
and Wedge Dude was another very serious, deep episode, right? Like the way different races approach problems, etc. That's a lot to go into in a 30-minute fucking episode.
Yeah.
Not all of them can be quite so deep, right?
Boimler's dedication to doing that Borg hologram program over and over and over, and just the simple line of "Yes, I taught the Borg Queen empathy" was like, wait, I want that to be an episode now. Like, hold
He also
up.
beat her at chess. Don't forget.
Yeah, just there are moments to dig into for that. For this, we kind of just went a little more superficial, but you know, Boimler gets triggered when his pit gets ripped off. He's worked for that pit.
Remember the episode from TOS, This Side of Paradise, the one that had the little plants that mind control you?
Yeah.
Equally had no depth to it, honestly.
One of those plants was in this episode.
I know. That's
Thanks.
what I
had a
remembered.
feeling.
That's why I remembered it. But just as an example, right? Like, that's an episode that's pretty fucking simplistic. It didn't have a deep meaning in TOS. And not every episode gets that.
There might be plot threads that weave from here to other things. Like, what if the Archaeology Guild gets a major donation from the Nagus for returning his staff, and something goes on with that?
Yeah, or Petra gets in trouble with a diamond, tries to kidnap her, and she calls Mariner for help, right? Like, oh, I've got this Starfleet girl I know. She's a badass. Let me hail her. While the Decora is chasing me in my little shuttle or something, right? Like, it can happen.
Right? Yeah, for sure.
Well, and I get that this show is different from Discovery and Strange New Worlds, etc. And the audience is probably different, the episode style as well. But when I look at these, and this just hit me with the episode from last week and this most recent one, in any other recordings we did for Picard, for example, Discovery, there were things I was ready to talk about. I knew were going to be big discussions. Let's get into it. But with Lower Decks, I'm just like, well, you know, not a whole lot happened. Let's look for the references and Easter eggs. And I know that there are some episodes where we do get some good quality deep dives. Just seems like it's marketably less than these other series. Now, I don't know if that's by design, if we're trying to look too deep into a show that's just surface comedy and fun.
It is.
So,
it's a show that is more fun, and it's a show that's shorter. There's less opportunities for it.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, considering that the creators of this show also worked on Rick and Morty, like, this show is not meant to be. I think that the whole point of the show was to be something different. I think that the whole point of this show was to still show the occasional Starfleet message, but be different, be comedy, be animated, be not what we're used to. And I think that I like that about it. And some people, and like, I see what you mean about like, I don't really know what I want to talk about. Like, I don't, I don't have any really deep stuff to talk about. And I do get that, because I also have that issue where I like, okay, well, what specific little Easter eggs do I want to talk about this time? Because some of the Easter eggs mean a lot, and some of the Easter eggs are just pictures of things, like the little Stargazer model or whatever it may be. Because I think that they like didn't get a Stargazer model in the Eagle Moss thing, and they were upset about that, so they put it in Lower Decks or something like that. But I think that this show is not meant to be like an Aesop's Fable. I don't think it's supposed to be lessons every single episode. I think sometimes it's just meant to be really funny. And I'm okay with that, because I like cartoons. I like cartoons. Not everybody likes cartoons. Not everybody likes cartoons that are just specifically like cartoons to be cartoons, and that's fine.
I think I'm spoiled. Is what it is. Being spoiled.
No.
I
know what you mean.
I think that both of you have very fair points, and it also does. There's a lot of dependency on what you sit down at the table for. And if you're sitting down at the table to be like, all right, I'm going to pause every 3 frames to see what I can see, then you might be...
And some people do that.
You might be Dag.
You might be... I was going to say you might be Gagi Yogi on Twitter, because that guy breaks things down like
it's
no
insane.
Other. What
he do,
that's incredibly awesome. The dude has notes from like the 90s when he was originally watching the shows, writing down all his stuff. He looks at the word meticulous and says you're not good enough.
So true.
But also you might just sit back and you just might want some laughs, and you might be like, you know what? What's the lesson of the episode? Star Trek may have had a morality play, and you were a kid, or when you're an adult now. So what does Star Trek bring to the table for you, and in what ways does Lower Decks fill that bucket? If you're listening, if you're watching, let us know in the comments. Hit us up on Twitter at Beyond Trek Pod, or Trek Nexus, or Captain Janeway, but with an X instead of an A in that first A. Renzo is at Hawkshark, and Big J is 76 Big J.
Yep.
Just let us know, like, what brings you to the table in Star Trek, and how does Lower Decks satisfy your craving? For everything else, I don't know. There was supposed to be something profound.
I'm good.
But my brain just wasn't functioning that far. So I'm just going to say to the audience, as always...
For everything else, there's Master Chief?
Master Chef. Master Chief, Oh, can we have a Halo cooking show?
Ooh.
Sure.
Cooking in
Absolutely.
Combat. Done.
Cooking in Combat.
Beyond Halo
Sold.
podcast.
Stay here for the Beyond Halo podcast, and thank you
Sold.
for always going boldly. The Beyond Trek podcast.
Hey everybody, I just wanted to give a quick shout out to our Patreon and Anchor supporters, to S. Tam and Nora Hickson. Thank you so much for being a part of Beyond Trek podcast.
We are Beyond Trek Podcast. Lower your inhibitions and surrender your ears. We will add inspirational and hilarious Trek content to your day. Your attention will adapt to subscribe to us. Resistance is futile.